to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true. And it feels alright when they come and say to you.
Hi, welcome along to NUFC Matters. This is a pre-recorded show. Delighted to welcome Liam Kennedy back. How are you, mate?
Really good, mate. As we've both been very, very busy.
Yeah.
It's been a bit longer than we thought it would be to get us back on, but we'll make it more a regular thing. I think that's the plan, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, mate. And yeah, it's just one of those things. Life sometimes takes over, mate, and catches up with us. But it's always good to talk Newcastle United for an hour with you. And the last time we had you on, we were hoping that it was going to be the end of the trophy drought. Sadly, it wasn't. How was your trip to Wembley, first of all?
Really good. Really enjoyed the weekend. Obviously didn't massively enjoy much of the game. And it's a funny one because I've seen some criticism online and everyone's justified their opinion. And I've flitted between one side of things and the other. And there's a lot of talk about, Manchester United fans turned up 10 minutes before kickoff, treated it like a normal game, went out there with a trophy. Of course, they've been there about 20 times since the last time we went there. And there was some criticism of fans saying, they treat it like a weekend away and we need to stop doing that. And there is an element of truth in that, but I'm not going to be somebody who's a killjoy and say, don't enjoy yourself. I did. I enjoyed myself. I think we've waited a long time for this kind of thing. And you can still win a trophy despite winning, enjoying yourself off the pitch as well. So I think it was a big opportunity missed on the pitch. Big opportunity missed. I think Loris Karius did quite well in the game. But I also think Nick Pope was a massive loss. I think just as a leadership and command and presence in that team, he would have made a big difference. But yeah, I think it's long gone now. I think everybody's kind of looking at the league now and thinking, can we sustain a charge towards Europe? Can we, kick back into life? I think is probably the way of looking at it in the last few weeks. It was decent at Man City last week, but it wasn't anywhere near enough to win a game against a team like that. And the same old, you could probably write a script for when Newcastle United play at the moment, although they've played some good sides. Even going back to the Bournemouth game and then going back to West Ham as well, that they're just a team that doesn't really look like scoring many goals. And I think it's going to be tough this weekend. But Newcastle United have got a couple of games in the next 2 weeks where you say, look, if you've got really European ambitions, you're going to have to go and get at least 4 points out of those next two games. And I would suggest, given the losses of late, I would say 6 points is probably one to keep you in any kind of Champions League contention, which seems to have slipped a touch since the last time we spoke.
Yeah, Europe's obviously going to be the only aim now. I mean, is the pressure off, Liam? Because we don't have the cup final hanging over us. We don't have the unbeaten run hanging over us. And at the moment, we're out of those Champions League slots. So, is the pressure off a little bit?
No, I don't believe it is. I think almost there wasn't an amazing amount of pressure on this season, but they've almost made a rod for their own backs by setting the bar so high. I think a lot of people have gone through this season with a big smile on their face, saying to themselves, you know what, we're ahead of schedule. Anything that comes this season will be a success. If you'd said to everybody at the start of the season you would make a cup final, you'd lose in it, but you'll be in the mix, a European mix, going into mid-March. I think most people would have snapped your hands off in the summer. But because they were second or third coming into the new year or over Christmas, flying, looking like a side who would not concede against anybody and was capable of beating anybody, then I think expectations rose, and rightly so, because they did look unstoppable at one point prior to the World Cup, prior to the tournament in the winter and prior to going to Saudi Arabia. I think they looked a totally different outfit. They haven't quite looked the same, in my opinion, since they've come back. That's not apportioning any particular blame to anything. I'm not saying they went to Saudi and dropped off, or they didn't have a good break or whatever. They just lost that momentum, which was always the worry. I didn't believe they would. And they did carry that through a touch without really impressing at the back end of December and into January. But it's becoming quite obvious now to me that the flaws in the squad make them a weaker unit and a weaker side. Newcastle United are a 25-man Premier League squad with 4 goalkeepers in it. Probably another 5 players on top of that. You know, your Manquillos, Lewis and others, Richie, all these type of players who ideally you wouldn't want anywhere near the team. So it's not a big squad. You're talking really a squad of around reasonable top-end Premier League quality. And I'm not talking top end. I mean just top half. Reasonable top half quality. You're talking about a squad of about 15 players. And it's really difficult to get through a season with that kind of level, to be honest. You're asking a lot of players who are starting week in, week out. And I've seen some criticism of people saying Miggy Almiron's just Miggy Almiron again. The lads virtually played every minute of the season. And the same goes for others in the team who have just dropped off a touch. I mean, Sean Longstaff's played virtually every minute, apart from that second half in the cup final. Joe Linton will be banned for the next 2 and he'll be a big miss, but he's played virtually every minute. Bruno's played every minute of being available. I mean, you're asking a lot of these. Just look at the back 4, to be honest. Every single one of those players is an automatic pick and they've played every single minute. There was always going to come a point where that would catch up with this team because no team with the intensity and speed, fitness, quality, mental intensity that the Premier League is played at, nowadays, it's impossible to have a team that would go a full season with using for the majority of it 13 or 14 players. It doesn't happen. It won't happen again. It's impossible. You need to have a squad, and that's one of the biggest problems that Newcastle United have at the moment is they just don't have that squad. It's one that can be fixed, and I think it will be fixed. But I think in some ways the January window, and it's easy with hindsight to say this, but I actually still stand by their decisions in many ways. I just wish they'd done something to counteract it, is they allowed 2 players to go who probably would have got minutes and would have allowed others breaks and rests. John Joe Shelby probably being one of them. And obviously Chris Wood, who was playing a lot of minutes anyway, coming off the bench in virtually every game at the first half of the season. Now, the money that was returned for those players who were fringe at best, John Joe Shelby, who the club didn't really want to trigger that contract, which would have been triggered had he played maybe 1 or 2 more games for Newcastle United. So that would have been triggered. They would have had a problem then offloading him in the summer and see why they did that. But I do believe they could have gone out and maybe plugged a gap with a 6-month loan. I think that would have been the best way forward. Look, there's been, to and fro with Eddie Howe and the people around him in that respect. I think I respect Howe's opinion, which was he would rather stick with what he had if he couldn't get somebody who thought was going to massively improve, or he was very keen not to upset the apple cart by bringing in too many new faces just to plug gaps. But I think if it was me, I would have at least brought somebody in, particularly in that midfield department, who, even with John Joe Shelby still in the squad, you would have said was still a body light. So it's probably gone into the second half of season 2, bodies light. The next best option off the bench is Elliot Anderson, who it's still questionable as whether he's actually 100% ready to be playing at this level. I think he is actually. And B, is a midfielder, because he's played the most of his formative years as a number 10, so probably would be more accustomed to working in one of those wider roles, maybe where Almiron or St. Maximin or whoever has played recently. So I think they've made little mistakes, but there was always going to be mistakes. There's always going to be teething problems. It's all about managing expectation, though. I think if Newcastle United didn't get European football next season, I think a lot of people will be rightfully disappointed given the start of the season that they had, because they built such a solid platform upon which to build. It just so happens that everybody else seems to have kicked on a touch in the second half of the season. We've stagnated. So it's been a tough one to take. If they'd managed to get themselves into this position by dropping, a couple of losses at the start of the season, but they literally looked unbeatable. The only game they lost was that Liverpool game, which they shouldn't have lost anyway, in the 97th or 98th minute. But they've been worthy losers recently. Manchester United in the cup final, a lot of huffing and puffing, but not really. They never really created anything apart from St. Maximin, where you would say that's a good, real goal scoring opportunity. It was a game of half chances and lots of effort and commitment, but never really looking like breaking a side down. You could say they created a little bit more with Man City in the last game, but again, was how much of that was really, are they showing a clinical enough side of a game to go and win these matches? And that's one of the biggest problems. I see a lot of criticism of Callum Wilson. He's been a great player for Newcastle United, and I still think he will be. But again, a player who has struggled with injuries and has played every minute available. And recently, I think there's Alexander Isak could be rightfully frustrated and not getting a bit more time out there. Weirdly, when he started matches recently, he's looked well off it. I'm just referring back to Bournemouth as the most recent example of that. He was arguably the worst player on the pitch at Bournemouth. Had a little bit of success in the second half. But I remember watching that game, remember what I was feeling at the time, thinking if Callum Wilson was playing against those centre-halves who weirdly couldn't deal with Isak, although his touch and his movement was awful, if Callum Wilson was playing, he would have bullied them. He would have got in there, been physical, created chances. They're just missing that little flourish at the end of things. And when you're not scoring goals, which they're not, the defensive stuff was always going to come out. I don't necessarily believe they're a side who are gifting teams loads of opportunities. It's just when you're not scoring goals, the pressure comes on your defenders to keep clean sheets, and they're not always going to keep clean sheets. It was never going to be a case they were going to go through a season conceding 20 goals. They were never going to do it. Not unless they went and won the league, which was never going to be on the agenda. So I think it's a weird one. It's a strange season. It's been fun. We've enjoyed the ride. But I think were they to go and finish 8th, I think there would be a lot of disappointment. I think Eddie Howe and his players would be very disappointed with themselves if they went and did that. It's not going to be for Newcastle United fans to say how disappointing that would be to that squad, because they, in January and February, they had the Champions League football potentially on the agenda. I think that's going to be very tough. I think it's going to be a right battle. But go and beat Wolves the weekend, then all of a sudden Newcastle United, you think, have they shaken off a little bit of that mid-season wobble, and can they kick on again? And I wouldn't bet against it, because I don't believe they've gone from being a team who looked like challenging for Champions League to suddenly one that couldn't make it. I do think they have got, like I say, a core of 13 to 14 who are top-end quality and can get them there. But it is asking a lot, I think, to hit that 4. But they've got to hit the 6, 7. They've got to. I think, like I say, it wouldn't be for fans to call it a disappointment. There'll be definite disappointment within the coaching staff, definite disappointment within the squad if they didn't manage to secure European football, even from the position they find themselves now.
I never put you in a position with questions, and I'm not going to start now. So feel free to say you don't want to answer this. It's only an opinion. We've spoken a lot about the camaraderie amongst the team. We've seen the team photographs by Serena Taylor, the club photographer, with everybody in them. Even Serena's been in them, and it's shown this wonderful team bonding that we've spoken so highly about on this podcast, all the way through. We've seen in recent weeks Ryan Fraser demoted from the first team squad to the 21s. And he's now training with them. Eddie Howe has come out, and he's from a month ago saying, I'd love to see him back in a black and white shirt, to now he's got no future at the club. Could that, and this is just me hypothetically putting something out there, could that potentially have maybe altered it? Because I know Eddie has said in press conferences, I know you like me, you hear the press conferences, you may not be at them, but you hear them. Has that maybe changed the equilibrium a little bit within that dressing room? Because there will be players in that dressing room who are friends of Fraser, and that can change the dimensions. Do you think that might have happened or not?
I don't believe Fraser was probably an influential enough figure within that dressing room, be that in a playing sense or character sense, to to influence too much. I think it's probably a good thing that he's been removed from the camp, removed from the group. Anybody who knows anything about Fraser's time at Newcastle United will know he was almost hinting at being a disruptive influence from within the first weeks of arriving at the football club. Now, that's not to suggest he's full stop and somebody who causes trouble, but he has got that element in him. Actions speak louder than words, and he's not somebody who's covered himself in glory with his actions with regards to his exit from Bournemouth and other ones. Even his decision, he's basically been sanctioned by every team that he's played for in his, mostly adult life. Bournemouth, when he left, did the dirty on Eddie Howe, and Bournemouth, as they were fighting relegation, refused to play because he wanted his big move. Had eyes, he thought, and he was getting fed by an agent, that he was going to Arsenal or Tottenham. Of course, that never, ever got close to materialising. Ended up in Newcastle United. I think, my understanding is, felt he was a bit above that anyway. Came in, did a decent job at times, worked hard, but never really established himself in the team. Of course, Eddie Howe gave him a second chance after the Bournemouth stuff, rightfully so. As soon as Eddie Howe came in, he caused problems with Scotland because made himself unavailable for Scotland and was pictured training with Eddie Howe's team, was doing the right thing by, trying again with Eddie Howe and Newcastle United and prioritising that, but again, was sanctioned by Scotland, and someone might be out there correct us, but I don't believe he's been selected by Steve Clarke since, or he may have been only recently, but hadn't for quite some time. Doesn't reflect really well on his character, and for me, he's been a player who's been very unhappy with not getting the level of game time that he's had this season. And I don't know if there's been any breaking point, any heated moment that might have caused this to happen. But I do know that it was a player they would happily have, from a playing perspective, happily have let go in January and potentially last summer as well. So I don't really think it necessarily is. But you never know, Steve. You never know the dynamic of these things. Fraser has got, quite a couple of former teammates in there, has been at the club for a good couple of years now. But I'd like to think that Howe's probably made the correct call here in not... and look, one thing I would say is there's always a way back. I think if Ryan Fraser gets his head down, works hard, good reports from the 21s, goes and plays some games for the 21s, shows himself to be a proper professional, then you never know. You never know, there could be a way back. I very much doubt it. I think we're 99.9% certain there won't be a way back. But stranger things have happened. But it's an interesting point you make. I mean, because of the dynamic that is portrayed, and I believe is the case for the most part, that there is a really positive dressing room atmosphere at Newcastle United, with some really good leaders in that dressing room. I mean, it does beg the question, is Eddie Howe too loyal to his leaders in the dressing room? Callum Wilson being the golden boy. I see a lot of people talking about that. And Dan Burn being a real character and leader. Is it time, is he being too loyal to him in a position where, really, being brutally honest, although he has played the majority of his Premier League career, by the way, as a left back, because played there mostly for Brighton too, but even by his own admission, he's a centre half playing left back, not a left back by nature. So is Eddie Howe being too loyal to a team that got them to a point, but for me could do with a little bit of freshening up? I think that's a consensus among fans, and I'd hope that Howe can maybe see that. It's not an error of his ways, but I do believe that if Matt Targett is fit enough, he should probably be playing, especially in a home game against a team lower down the division, where you would expect to have more ball and expect to have more opportunities to get forward down both flanks. Now, Dan Burn tries his balls off to get up there, and he does bomb on, and it's not a lack of effort. It's just that bit of quality. So if he gets the ball out there on the left-hand side, there was a lot of influence from Trippier at the back end last season, but the guy who put the most crosses in the box for Newcastle United from January onwards was Matt Targett. His delivery from the left gives you a different option from free kicks, from corners. And I think it's probably about time he gets a little run in this side, because he has got defensive faults. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But he's a solid enough Premier League performer that he probably should be given the opportunity. And whether that's at the expense of Dan Burn, I'm not sure. That's the decision for him to make at centre-half. But it would be for me. I would be dropping Dan Burn out and bringing Matt Targett in. And I think it's Alexander Isak's time to maybe get 4 or 5 games to get a little run up front and allow him to get some momentum. Because that's one thing that he's got in, had a couple of games, some of them iffy, scored the odd goal, and then got injured or dropped out the team. I'd like to see him get a good run of 4 or 5, 6 games, given the opportunity. We know what Callum Wilson can do. And in many ways, I talked about the pressure before, but really, they haven't got a lot to lose. It isn't working for them at the moment. So why not give Isak a little run of games and see what he can produce? And I really enjoy his link up with Alan St. Maximin. And I would like to see him get a run of games as well, being brutally honest. I think the two of them have shown a decent link up together. And I was disappointed. Again, hindsight's a big thing, that we couldn't have played those two who showed against Liverpool the week previous that they had a connection and could create chances and spaces. And we didn't get to see that really properly at Wembley against Manchester United. I would like to have seen that.
Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it? Manchester City away, with the opportunity to change things, with Fabian Schar being out with a concussion. He chose to go with Burn at left back and bring Lascelles back in at centre half. And I haven't met a Newcastle fan yet who didn't think Lascelles had a good game last weekend.
Yeah,
Given himself a bit of a problem, hasn't he, with this game at home? Because unless he's had a conversation with Lascelles previously to the game and said, look, you're doing us a favour today, but maybe he knows his place. He's got a bit of a problem, because really Lascelles deserves a chance to play on at the weekend.
He does, but I wouldn't. I would just go back to Fabian Schar. Like I said, my back four the weekend would be Trippier and Targett with Botman and Schar. That would be my preference. I can't make a case for Jamal Lascelles, but what I will say is he's a top. Anybody who's watched our show, Steve, for the years that we've been doing it, will know that I've always stood up for Jamal Lascelles because of the character that he is, the way he carries himself, his leadership qualities in certain situations within the dressing room. I think he's been a decent player for Newcastle United, not top level. I think everybody, it'd be a really hard case to make to say he was any more than what he really is. But he's been a good captain through some tough times, and I think he knows his place in this squad. Though I think it's a one of them that everybody. There's a lot of egos kicks around in football. A lot of egos kicks around in journalism. You only have to knock around a press room for a little while, but when you're working at any job, everybody knows levels. I think you can be working alongside somebody and say, they're good. You know what they know what they're doing. Or there's other times where you think, you know what, I'm better than him. And I think that happens in any line of work, whether it be you turning up to a casting for your acting, or whether that be me sitting in a press room, writing the same match report as somebody sitting next to us, or whether that be a footballer in the training field. They know levels, and they probably know where they sit in the pecking order. I think that's the case with Jamal Lascelles. I think he knows he's the fourth best centre half at the club, and I would be very surprised if he was still at the football club come the start of next season as well.
Yeah, me too. And Matt Targett, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because ultimately he's a left back who didn't do anything wrong for us. Played in the season that kept us in the division. And again, I think we all felt that Dan Burn was basically doing a cover job there, and as soon as Matt Targett was fit, he would be a shoe-in, but he's not. Do you think he's going to stick with Burn in these next 14 games, or do you think there's a chance that Targett may, make an appearance sooner rather than later?
I think if I had to put my money on it, I think he'll probably stick with Burn at the weekend. It's not the decision I would make, and I think most people would probably agree with us that they would go for Target as well. It's just purely the final third quality for me. It's not a criticism of Dan Burn at all, because I think he's been arguably not far off virtually the best signing that they've made, pound for pound. But he just lacks that, if a ball goes out there quick and he's sort of 15 yards away from the corner of the box, sort of 35 yards out, Matt Target or Kieran Trippier on the other side's first decision would be, right, I'll see if I can whip one in. And that's what Callum Wilson or Isak or whoever's in the middle will want. They don't want you to stop, check, turn back in, pass it back into the middle and start again. And then he'll overlap again and it'll have to happen again because he hasn't got that quality on the ball to be able to whip a ball in. Or the confidence, I think, at times. I don't think he particularly backs himself to do that because, like I say, levels he'll know himself that it potentially isn't one of his strengths. And that's no criticism of him because, like I say, I think he's been tremendous. I just think, particularly at home, against a team where you're arguably going to have more of the ball than them, the lower down the division, it's an opportunity for 3 points. I think having that extra point of attack coming from the left, a double point of attack like they have on the right-hand side on the left would be beneficial. The amount of games, the lads who sit around me at St James, isn't it, away games, will know the amount of times in recent weeks where I've said at half time, get Matt Target on, get him on. There's only you make a change anywhere else, get Matt Target on because it'll just give you that different point of attack and take away the predictability in some ways that a lot of Newcastle United's attacks are going to come down the right-hand side in a particular manner. Put Matt Target in there, you lose a little bit of the defensive solidity and solidity of the team in general, but you have a different attacking point, and I think they could do something like that at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree, mate, 100%. And I just think, he didn't do anything wrong. He deserves an opportunity maybe to get back in the team. Okay, halfway through the show, as always, it's time for the ads.
A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay as you go, waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. You can order them from mrvickys.co.uk or by calling 01768 210 102. Welcome aboard to Fruy Vita Getaways. You can email them at fruivitagetaways@gmail.com. Call or text them 0792 842 7895. Please join and share their Facebook group as well at Fruy Vita Getaways. Book your holidays or short breaks in the UK or around the world with them. Let them find your happy place. ABTA and ATOL registered. Thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. And thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle. And the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com, where you can buy lots of t-shirts and merchandise. If you want to subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button underneath this video today. It is free to do so. Hit the thumb up to like the video. It's good for the algorithm. And click share to share to your other social media. If you do subscribe, we do send you a free car sticker. To get that, email john@nufcmatters.com and he'll post you one out. If you want to join the NUFC Matters cult, then put your smartphone over this QR code now and it will take you straight there. Alternatively, go to the website, nufcmatters.com, and you can join for a one-off payment of £25. You'll receive a cup, a pen, a membership card, and a scarf, and entry into the monthly draw. You can also join via YouTube, and if you click join beneath the video, you will see a variety of prices and how you can support the channel. You can alternatively make a donation with a super chat in the chat tonight. Just click the $sign. We're also available on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast providers. We also help the food bank on this show. NUFCfansfoodbank.co.uk is where you'll find the matchday bucket and you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. As always, we've got a whole host of events coming up throughout the year. An evening with Nobby Solano takes place on Saturday the 25th of March at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets £15, Book now at nufcmatters.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley at Leamington Labour Club. Tickets are £20, 31st of March, and you can get them direct from the venue. An evening with Nobby Solano, Good Friday, the 7th of April at 4 p.m. Tickets are a tenner and available behind the bar at Felling Cricket Club in Gateshead. An evening with Supermac, hosted by Gibbo at the Time House Surf Cafe, Tuesday the 11th of April. And tickets direct from the venue. This is a limited ticket event, only 35 tickets available, so book soon. And an evening with Frank Clark and John Gibson, Thursday the 20th of April. Tickets are £15. Book now at nufcmatters.com. In June, Rob Lee will be at Louis Liquor Store in Newcastle, and you can get tickets direct from the venue. And an evening with Rob Lee, Lee Clark, John Beresford takes place the following evening, Friday the 2nd of June at the Grand Hotel in Gosforth. This is in aid of the Heel and Toe charity, and tickets are available from their website, www.heelandtoe.org.uk/events. And if you're a boxing fan, the Night of Champions comes to Gateshead at the Fed. Frank Bruno, Ricky Hatton, Nigel Benn and Joe Calzaghe are part of the UK tour, and you can get your tickets from www.goldstarpromotions.co.uk.
Okay, just want to talk about Bruno now, Liam, and he won Sports Writers Player of the Year. Well deserved, it has to be said. Well, in your mind, where is he at now? I think probably last season, after only a handful of games, people were calling him a legend. What's your thoughts on him now? What does he bring to Newcastle for you, Bruno?
He's a winning mentality. Top quality. Everything that Newcastle United does as a team goes through him and is influenced by him. Without him, the team doesn't win football matches. And I hate saying they're a one-man team, but they're just not the same without him in it. I don't think he's in his best run of form at the minute. I think that couple of weeks out, the team didn't help him. But he is a top class player who would grace any midfield, I think, in the Premier League and not look out of place. An incredible footballer who Newcastle United, in my opinion, should be looking to add one of him in that level every summer and every transfer window. They should be looking to add a player of that quality and capability because he's been transformative in the way that he's gone about things. I do think Newcastle United need to improve that. They shouldn't be a team that one player drops out, they become a whole different outfit. But he needs players around him. I think that's one of the big areas for me that they do need to transform in the summer is the midfield. For all, I'm a massive fan, and I think these players will hang around. I think Longstaff and Joe Linton for me are really, really good footballers who have got a medium-term to long-term future at this football club. But I think we need players, at least one in and around the Bruno ilk. And I get it, they're not easy. There isn't Brunos kicking around in every team. There just isn't. But I think they need to make sure that they sign players of that kind of quality. But they're not cheap. Players of that quality aren't cheap. They need to use their connections. They need to start building. And they really need to be getting bodies through the door. They need to be looking, and there's been a lot of talk and a lot of rumour about them looking for, the next Moses Casados and these types and Alexis McAllisters who've turned up at Brighton with a Dan Ashworth model and scouting system. That doesn't come in overnight. That does take time to build. But I think that's what they need. They do need to fill their squad out. You might not be able to go and get ready-made Bruno, but can you get somebody who turns into a Bruno level in 2 years' time? Can you get 3 or 4 of them through the door and let them grow with the football club? And that's one of the biggest things that really warms fans, in my opinion, and definitely warms me to the footballer is his commitment. He's a very committed footballer on the pitch. He's the way he conducts himself off the field. He's very captaincy material. I think he's a real asset to this football club, and seems to be an asset who wants to remain at the football club and grow with it. Talks about writing the story, becoming part of the story with Alan Shearer and others he was talking about at the Football Writers Do at the Ramside earlier this week. And I'd love to see him do that. I think the only threat to that would be somebody like a Real Madrid or a mega club coming in, because it would be really difficult for somebody to turn that down. If you only put yourself in that position, it would be a very difficult one move to not make. But he seems happy in the Premier League. He seems happy in Newcastle United. He's a big fish in a still relatively small pond at Newcastle United. And what we need to do is we need to start filling that pond up with a few whoppers. Never mind, the little fish that sort of are swimming around at the moment, because there's a little bit too much of that in the squad. Like I say, I mentioned it before, but Ryan Fraser's part of that squad. Mark Gillespie, Ryan Fraser, Paul Dummett, Jamal Lewis, Javier Manquillo, Matt Ritchie. There's six of the 25 who, would arguably they're arguably championship players. And that's without getting into the next level of group who are contributing quite regularly. Jamal Lascelles, Jacob Murphy and others who are probably not the level you would say you would want to move forward, but are contributing and can't be criticised for that contribution. Emil Kraft, another, and who probably fits into that Lascelles and Murphy category. But when you start listing it and you go through, there's a lot of fat still to trim from this squad, and they're going to have to, they've trimmed a lot already, but there's still a big amount to go. I mean, you'd easily drop 4 or 5 of those because they're not contributing. Paul Dummett is not contributing, has not contributed, and makes absolutely no sense in being in the squad. Matt Ritchie, largely, apart from a couple of cameos off the bench because he's absolutely had to, has been a passenger this season and is irrelevant in this team, although a good character off the field. Ryan Fraser, as you mentioned before, another. Javier Manquillo, Emil Kraft unlucky with his injury. But there's just so much fat to trim from this squad still to get up to the level. And it's one of the balances they're going to have to make. Are they going to go out and spend, sign another 3 players for 100 million? Spend 35 million on a player each. Does that take them up the levels where they want to be, or are they going to try and spread it around a little bit more and just slowly up the levels by signing one big player who contributes massively to improving the team, and then sign 4 or 5 others who can improve the squad rather than necessarily the first team? It's going to be a big summer. It's been a big decision, and I think a lot of it will be defined by where they find themselves. We've had a lot of talk of sponsorship deals. I think that's been a slow process. Amanda Stavey discussed that recently at the FT Business Conference, Business of Football Conference. So I think it's one of those where if they can get the sponsorship through the door, which I believe they are, it is all heading in the right direction. And if they could somehow get a Champions League football, then I think you would see potentially a really transformative summer, because your FFP potential and levels goes up massively. Your earning potential as a football club and the wiggle room you then get from a financial perspective. But if they don't get European football and only have the sponsorship deals, then it does change things. It does change things. It won't be as transformative and as progressive a summer as potentially it could have been.
We're speaking to Alan Shearer this week, and we're just talking about Europe. And I said to him, which European competition would you be happy with us, being in? And my suggestion to him was that, I would rather be in the Champions League because you've got the opportunity to bring in better players playing in that competition than I would be being in, say, the conference. And he agreed, he says, wouldn't want to be in the conference, but perhaps the Europa League would be best, for Newcastle moving forward this year. But it's all about opinions, I guess. What's your opinion? Which European competition would you like to see Newcastle in next season?
Champions League. Champions League, of course I would. I've always held the hope that, and I've said it on this show, anybody can check back, but I've been on the record long before any takeover and said I have faith that we'll hear the Champions League anthem at St James's Park again, and I didn't think it would be as speedily as could potentially be, but I still got that faith. They'll end up in the Champions League, and I believe Newcastle United will win trophies. It's just how quickly they get there. And I think they could have done a bit more this year to help the manager out, I think, and the manager maybe could have. I think they'd probably be better suited if he hadn't have been so staunch on his stance with regards to players coming in. I think we could have been in a different position just having that extra body or two. Because like I said, there's a lot of players in this squad now who if asked to contribute, will not be able to. Paul Dummett's played one game this season and was really poor because he's a player who has performed at his best for Newcastle United when he gets a run of games. He's the type of player who gets a run of games and gets into a groove and speed and is good in doing that, but hasn't played a lot of football for a long time. And there's a few players like that who have not played a lot of football. So even when you look at the squad, it's not even really a well put together squad in that respect, that because the team's been so consistent and there's been a lot of continuity to the 11 that's picked every week. You're even talking about players come off the bench who aren't match fit. So if you suddenly asked Javier Manquillo to come in and had to do a job because one of the fullbacks was out, he's barely kicked the ball. He's barely kicked the ball in a year. And that goes for Jamal Lewis, barely kicked the ball in a year. They're not even backup players at this point because they're not fit enough. They're not at the levels that you would expect most people to be at this point in the season. And when you talk about Champions League, I mean, it would have to be a transformative summer. I mean, are we talking about Paul Dummett and even Jacob Murphy? We're talking about Jacob Murphy playing at the San Siro or the Bernabeu. Jacob Murphy tearing about for the last 5 minutes at the Bernabeu. We've come a long way in a short space of time, and there's still a long, long way to go. That's no criticism of Jacob Murphy, by the way, because I actually, I'm not. He's got his limitations as a footballer. I get that, but I just do really like him as a character, as a professional, and I think he's had a really good impact actually this season at Newcastle United, both on and off the pitch. But it's about levels, and I mentioned a few times that there's a lot of players in this squad. Never mind Conference League, they're well below that. So to ask them to get into a Champions League campaign would require a really transformative summer. You'd need to be dropping 7 or 8 players out of this squad who just aren't up to that level if you want to survive in a Champions League. But look, I would take it. If you ask me, but I'm the type of person that I see there are massive negatives to getting in the Europa League and Conference League because of the nature of the way it's set up, the competition, when you play, where you play. But I just think beggars can't be choosers. And I think if Newcastle United were to get in any European, I would take the Conference League, not from the position we've been in. I want better. But if you're offered as the Conference League at the start of the season, I would have snapped your hand off. So I'm not going to be somebody now who says if they did get in, I think that would be the 3 out of the 3 that you wouldn't want to get in. If you could choose, if you had a choice that was one of the 3, it would be the third choice, Europa League and then Champions League. But I'll take any European competition if offered, and I would have at the start of the season. And I think then we could regard the season as a reasonable success, but with limitations. If Newcastle went and finished 7th, you would say, look, they had a really good season, probably overperformed at the start, and the lack of depth in any way, shape or form in the squad was really proven at the back end of the season. Let's say if they finish 8th, I think it'd be a different conversation. I think there'll be a lot of disappointed faces around Tyneside. None more so than the one we'll see in the dugout on Sunday.
What does the future hold, do you think, for Elliot Anderson over the next few months?
Yeah, I think you'll see bits of game time. I do. I think he's going to be needed. It's good for his career. It's the best thing that possibly could be happening is this little midfield crisis that they find themselves in. I think we'll see. I think he'll come off the bench again at the weekend. I think he was really unlucky in his first Premier League start against Liverpool. He was the one who got taken off for the Nick Pope incident, which was sad and a shame because I didn't think he was doing too bad at that point. I still think he's a young player who's learning a lot as he's going. And the decision's been taken purely in January to keep him around because there isn't any others. There isn't any other bodies in there, so he's going to have a big part to play. Whether that's starting games, I'd be doubtful unless there's another couple of injuries or suspensions. But I do think we'll see him probably in most games off the bench to come on and influence things and just give a different dynamic. Because I think he's a talented boy who, at this stage, for me, at this stage in age, is probably further ahead than Longstaff was in terms of ability and things like that. And you look at the career Longstaff has forged for himself, which is incredible. Built a lot on hard work and commitment. But I think Anderson's got probably better raw tools and just needs shape in the right way. The benefit that Longstaff has, well, he went and had some good loan spells. And that's probably been wasted a little bit, but it's more the football club's fault than anything. There's been quite a lot of footballers who've gone on to have good careers have been wasted by the football club. Freddie Woodman was probably one of them, and others as well in recent years, just the way that the football club runs or ran, previously under previous management. But I think Anderson probably could have done with a 25-game loan in the Championship, even the top end of League One. Could have done with that. Probably, wouldn't have been a harm for him to stay on at Bristol Rovers even, with a promotion, etc. And then come back the second half of the season a bit more ready than what he probably is. But you ask managers and they'll counter that with the best training ground they possibly could be is learning with the team and the players that they're going to be playing with. But what we want to see is a little bit more opportunity, and I think that will come at the back end of the season. I like him, Steve. I don't know what your opinion is on him.
Yeah, I do think he's going to have a chance. I think the fact that he started him against Liverpool a few weeks ago, it seems like months ago, doesn't it? Because of the cup final, I guess. But, when he started him, he clearly had confidence to do that. And it hadn't been for the sending off of Nick Pope, he may well have played, a full game there. So I think he might get an opportunity. And obviously we've got the game coming up at the weekend against Wolves. He's got a chance. He's got a choice to make in the midfield as well, hasn't he? Because as you mentioned earlier on, Joe Linton is now on 10 yellow cards, so he now misses 2 games. Yeah. What would you do in that midfield at the weekend? Gordon, of course, available. Played quite well, I thought, last week in fits and starts, although I'm not sure that's the best position for him. You've already mentioned Isak potentially getting in. We've got options in the midfield despite losing Joe Linton.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Willock comes in, doesn't he? Who gives a different dynamic with his energy and his speed, his ability to cover amazing yards on the park with so many short, long strides. He's got real strengths in some ways. Maybe lacks a little bit technically. You lose the physicality that Joe Linton gives you, but I think they're well equipped enough with a midfield to say Bruno, Longstaff, and Willock. I think they'll be all right. I think they'll be all right in a game like this. It's not that they're losing any of that quality in particular. And I think Willock can come in and do a job on that left-hand side. For me, personally, I mean, I'm not sure this is their best positions. My front three, so I've said me midfield. I've already told you me back four with Target coming in. My midfield three. My front three would be Isak leading the line. I'd play Maximin on the left. And it would be a really close call to say whether you play Gordon or whether you play Almiron. It's tough to drop Almiron, but I'd be tempted to maybe go for Gordon in a front three. That would possibly be just to change things up. I think this team has worked so hard. It's produced the goods to a point. I just think it needs a little bit of freshening up. I really do. And I think that there is bodies there that they can freshen it up. Almiron, it's been great this season, and I think the criticism of him recently is tough because he's put some shift in. He's ran a lot of yards, same as Longstaff, like incredible. But it just needs that little bit of freshening up, and I think there's a good opportunity to do it.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Just getting back to the cup final, Loris Karius obviously had a game, had a run out. We're back to normal, of course. Nick Pope back in the sticks for the Man City game. What did you make of Karius? And I mean, I've got to be honest, I can't see him staying at Newcastle after the season finishes.
It's all very strange, isn't it, actually?
Yeah.
I just find the whole situation really odd. A player who trains all week and then doesn't travel at all with the team, isn't around on match days. It must be the arrangement that they have with him, but it is all very, very strange. I actually think he's a really capable goalkeeper. I think he for a lad who had so much pressure and so much focus on him in the week up to it, the mistakes that he'd made in his career previously, the lack of games that he'd had in his career, and the arguments and fallouts he'd had with Jurgen Klopp, went from being the first choice goalkeeper at Liverpool to fifth choice in the space of a few weeks. Still, for a relatively young lad, I think he dealt with it really well and commanded himself quite well in that game. Could he have maybe got something more on the heavily deflected Rashford goal? Possibly, but I think he made some fantastic saves beyond that. So I think an evaluation of his performance was really good. And would I like to see him stay at the football club? Judge on that performance, yes, but I just don't really understand what the situation is behind the scenes. It's quite obvious that he's training with the team, but then spend his weekends in Italy or elsewhere in Europe, which I'm not, he came in to plug a gap and Christ, they needed him. But it's just all very strange, and I don't know where the commitment levels are from the player towards wanting to stay or whether the football club are wanting to keep him. I just don't understand the dynamic. I'd quite happily have it explained to us. I've asked for clarity in the past and had bits explained, but I think it's all just very strange. I've not known a situation like it with a footballer, particularly not at a Premier League football club.
No, definitely a strange situation, but yeah, as you say, he did us a big, big favour, and we'll be, forever thankful for that. So coming up to the weekend, it is the battle for Europe now. Liverpool have started making a late run. They've had a horrendous season by their own standards, but that 7-0 win against Manchester United will have certainly boosted their morale. Looking at the teams around us and looking at our run-in, where do you see Newcastle finishing this year? Because we've got quite a few fixtures away from home. Just going through the fixtures here now. After the Wolves game, we've got Forest away. Then we've got Manchester United at home, which is it's a 6-pointer really for us, which is nice to see. Then we've got a succession of away games: West Ham away, Brentford away, Aston Villa away. Then we've got another one of our rivals, Tottenham, at home on the 23rd. And bearing in mind, we've got a couple of games in hand on them at the moment. Everton away is next. Then we've got Southampton at home. Arsenal, who are obviously title contenders, come to St James's Park in May. And then we've got Leeds away, Leicester at home, Chelsea away, Brighton at home. Chelsea, at this moment in time, not a big threat. Brighton, of course, another team which you would say are rivals. I missed Brentford out as well. Brentford are in and around there. A lot can change, of course, between now and the end of the season. But looking at those fixtures, are we in a decent position to mount a serious challenge for Europe in these final games?
Yes, absolutely. I don't see any reason why not. There's nothing really to fear from that fixture list. Nothing to fear at all. You've played the majority of your really tough on paper games away from home. You've already ticked off the majority of those. And I think it's just a lot depends on how the players react, because they've had a tough couple of weeks. If they can bounce back with a win on Sunday, it'll make a big difference. It really will. Then you head into the Nottingham Forest game with a little bit of confidence. Now, they're not a bad side, Forest. They're not a bad side. Some really, Brennan Johnson, for me, I think has been one of the standout young players to grace the Premier League this season. I've been really impressed when I've seen him. Had a slow start, but it's been impressive of late. They've got a few other players in there that they're decent. So I think, I think Newcastle's got nothing to fear. But I think we'll know a lot about this team, about how they perform on Sunday. If it's very Bournemouth and West Ham like on Sunday, you'd have concerns about where they're going to finish. But if they bounce back with a win, I mean, they've been poor this season. I mean, look at the game that they have won was Fulham, which if Mitrovic doesn't totally balls that penalty up, then you're probably losing that game. Didn't feel, it was pretty even. Apart from that, they've flattered to deceive largely in games, playing well in patches, putting a lot of good stuff together without any clinical edge and shipping the odd goal. So I don't know. I think there's nothing to fear. And going back to your question, where do you think that they'll finish this season? If I had to put my money on it now, I think they'll probably finish where they are now. I think they'll probably finish 6th. And I would be relatively happy with that. Relatively. Yeah, I would be happy. I would be happy with that. But we're also with a little bit of a caveat to saying, if only. I think that would probably be where I would stand at the end of the season.
Okay. So Newcastle United take on Wolverhampton Wanderers this coming weekend. It's a 4:30 kickoff. It's live on Sky Sports this coming Sunday. Joe Linton serves the first of a 2-match ban. Fabian Schar is expected to be available after sitting out the defeat of Manchester City due to concussion. There is a doubt over Bruno. We'll find out. We will have found out more at the press conference. Bearing in mind this is a pre-recorded show. Supermac will be at the Dog and Parrot at 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock. And at Pumfries at 2 o'clock, Gibbo and John Anderson. Referee for this particular game is Andy Madley, which is the second game in charge of a Newcastle fixture, the 0-0 draw at Arsenal being the first, and VAR is Tony Harrington. Okay, mate, give us your view and your prediction on the game at the weekend.
I don't know what I think, actually. It's one of those heart and head things. Like, I'm like trying to convince myself that I think, come on, right, they'll put all this behind them. They'll go and win 2-0. I just think it's going to be really tight. And if I was having to put money on it, it's got like a 1s each written all over it, hasn't it? Something like that. That's what I would imagine. A 1s each.
Yeah, I've got to be honest, mate. That's what I'm going for as well. I think a 1-1 draw is where we're going with this, which won't appease the doom mongers. But let's face it, it'll stop the rot. 3 games, 3 defeats. It'll stop the rot, mate. And
a goal would be a really positive thing, because that's 3 2-0 consecutive 2-0 defeats, isn't it? So we need a goal. Yeah. We need a goal from somewhere. It needs to go off somebody's backside or something. They need to just, I think we'll see a goal. I think that'll be a positive. That'll be what positive for the weekend. We'll get a goal. Something to celebrate for the masses who've been starved of any goal action for so long.
Yeah. We'll remain confident, mate. Got to, mate. You've got to. All right. Great to have you on. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, mate. And hopefully get you on again next week. But for now, Liam Kennedy, thanks very much, mate. Take care.
Cheers.